But yeah, so it's all good. So Michael, how are you doing?
Very good. Thank you for asking me to join. And you caught
Yeah,
me
well,
in.
you're always welcome.
Oh, I realize that. Thank you. Doing good. Life goes on. Stuff is
You
happening,
ought to
but
be in movies.
got to keep positive and keep active and doing things. I have my moments like we all do.
We all do. Are you sure?
I believe I would think that would be
I think
a
that's
good
true.
question to ask.
Yeah, speaking for myself, I definitely have, some moments
I,
when
that
I'm up
I do.
and
That
some
I
moments
do.
when I'm down, right? Um, but I'm getting better at it, like everything else, it improves over time, right? And so I liken this process that we go through here with the visualizations and working in the workbook, making a habit of that every day. I liken that to, hitting a golf ball, right? And it's quite common if you hear these golf pros being interviewed, somebody will say, did you learn anything today on the driving range? And as often as not, they'll say, yeah, as a matter of fact, I figured something out. I moved my little pinky over a quarter of an inch and it helped my slice. So it's kind of like that. And that's a difficult thing I find to get across to people because people tend to think, in my experience, this is my opinion, people tend to think that the answer that they're looking for is information. And one of my themes is it's not information. You have information already. I mean, you probably got bookshelves full of books and recordings and things that have the information that you need. So it's the application, right? Because when you apply the information, like when you work in the workbook and you fill out these various worksheets, what happens for me is every once in a while, I'll just get a new idea about it, a new angle on it or something. And I sort of go, hey, I never thought about that before. And so that makes everything worthwhile, right? Because if you have something, whether it's an attitude or a memory or a past experience or some kind of failure or some painful experience that you're trying to reframe, I mean, I've had the experience of reviewing and trying to reframe a negative event from the past for probably 5 years or 10 years on and off. And then all of a sudden one day it's like, oh, hey, I never thought of this before. If I think of it this way, it's like everything changes. And that's the thing I think that people don't get. It's the repetition, of a simple process that makes the difference, right? You agree, Michael? Yeah. I see you nodding there, but you got your mic off, so that's okay. So yeah, one of the I developed a new presentation recently. I might have mentioned it to you. I call it the new science of happiness, right? And so I contacted a few different companies that run senior residences because I thought maybe they'd be a good target. They'd be a good group to approach, right? Well, man, that thing has taken off. I have several companies here in Victoria that I'm working with. They want me to come in and do presentations. I've done one so far, and they want me to come back. And I have a couple other companies that called me this week, and they've organized a couple of presentations. And when I was on Coast to Coast on the 6th, right, May 6th, so that's like 2 weeks ago, 20 days ago, I guess 3 weeks ago. I mentioned Phil, working with the seniors, and the people on my podcast here are, setting goals and achieving things. And I mentioned Phil, being a senior, decided to celebrate his 80th birthday by running in this race, this 10K race, right? Well, that's got quite a bit of attention. I had somebody call me after that last week and invite me to do a podcast. They have a podcast for seniors, right? So I did that yesterday, and they're going to post it. I'm not sure when. Pretty soon, I think. I'll send you a link to it. But that was very interesting. And then I got another company that I did some work for a couple of years ago. They called me up and they want me to do some work for them. So I'm booked pretty well the whole month of July and August now. I'm going to be busy almost every day. And as I say, I'm working with this marketing company now. I'm going through these videos and organizing them and everything. So, I got more stuff on my plate than than I can handle almost, right? Which is good, One of the points that I made when I was talking to these people yesterday on this podcast for seniors was it's vital to have a goal. And, the goal doesn't have to be to make $1 million or something like that, take a trip around the world, It could be something simple, like organizing your room or starting a diary or writing a letter to a loved one or something, but there's something magical about a goal that I believe it just changes your body chemistry. And you start to feel good once you start doing it. You take a step in that direction, and all these neurochemicals, dopamine and adrenaline and whatever else, they kick in. And so it's great to have things to do. It's great to have things you're working on, which I have a ton now, So, comments?
I think that's great, Anthony, because, I think, in a senior's home, it's almost like we're sent out to pasture and, just waiting to go amongst all these old people, not doing anything, playing my cards. And I think that myself, I would still want to have a connection and utilize, what I do have left in a sense. So to have somebody like you come in and sharing this would create a sense of excitement. I have a friend, Darcy, who's a singer, and he goes to senior homes all the time. They love it.
Right.
It's just an opportunity to be connected with something. And I think it's important because it's, a sense of being alone, disconnected.
Well, that's what I thought, and like I said, I approached this one company and so they arranged a talk, which was on the 6th, I remember, the 6th of May, the same day I was on Coast to Coast. And so, but they invited me to come over a week before to have lunch. They had some kind of Italian festival or something. And so the whole week was all this Italian stuff. And so they had this Italian meal on one of the days, and so they invited me to come. So I went in there, and I think it was the first time I'd ever been in one of those senior homes, senior residence. And I was a little bit, curious and also maybe a little apprehensive. I didn't know what to expect, right? But it was great. I sat down at a table with 3 other people there, and one of them was a person who was visiting like me, who was thinking of moving in there. Another one was a person who'd been there for quite a few years and had his own apartment, And then the other person at the table was a person who was in a sort of a situation where he has to be cared for, a little bit. He's in a wheelchair, right? So I realized, there's quite a bit of variety in that building, and probably in most of the buildings. Like some people are sort of renting an apartment, and they live just the same as they would live essentially in their own place, but they have access to, I guess, laundry and cleaning and cooking and that sort of thing if they want it, or they can do it themselves. And other people, are, they need a little more attention, so they can get that, right? And when I did my talk, some of the people in the room were really attentive and asked questions and were really interested in what I was talking about. and other people were like asleep, I think, or nodding off, right? And so, which was okay too. I mean, I didn't care. I was, I appreciated them being there, right? So, yeah, it's something I hadn't thought about it until just a month or two ago. So I put together this idea, and it's proving to pay off, right? Greg, you're pretty quiet there.
I'm just trying to, I've got birds chirping next to me and I've got the windows down when I'm with you. So I'm trying to control the temperature, the lighting and everything, but, it's got me being a little quiet. So, I was laughing a little bit because I've got a relative that has recently moved into a senior facility and, they've taken on kind of a mission of taking care of the other people. And there's people above and below them in terms of capability.
Right.
So they're kind of in the middle. And that's been really exciting on the one hand to realize you're not so poorly off. Because you see some people that are really struggling or need a lot of care and some people that are really vital and almost lose it like an apartment when they come in full living. But the meals are provided and things like that. And they're having a ball. They're just really, we were apprehensive when they went in and now they're just really having the time of their life, which I think is a great attitude in the senior center because, they're helping people get down the hallway and helping people with hobbies and, making puzzles and playing, I think they play wheelchair volleyball kind of thing with the big balloon. And I mean, they're just having a great time, which is, I think, the way you should enjoy a senior center, ideally.
Yeah.
Because it's, the trap is you start to get that waiting room kind of feeling. And I think once for me, I've had to, over the last number of years, develop a philosophy of when this life is over, transitioning in. And I grew up Catholic, so you are Christian. So you certainly have a heaven or hell kind of philosophy that's kind of safe. But I've had broader, I met Young Coast to Coast. They've talked about all kinds of different possibilities. I've kind of mapped my mind that, that either way I'm fine, kind of thing. And so, as I progress in the future, I don't look at, the end of life as the end of life. I look at it as a transition into another life. And therefore I can approach it with a positive attitude and say it'll just be different. So I've incorporated that philosophy in my purpose for living. And so I think you have to have a purpose. I think goals are a subset of that. Having a goal in mind really makes you, there's nothing like being in a sailboat and not having anywhere to go and bobbing around in the lake, right? I mean, it's pretty boring. But once you say, hey, let's go over to Ontario or let's go to the Great Lakes, let's go to Erie, let's, go there. I mean, now all of a sudden you got a goal, you've got the map, you've got the destination. I really like your analogy of being a sailor, through life, and we navigate the weather. And Michael's talking about the weather being, bad sometimes, our mood being, off, or, navigating these challenges. Once you kind of have a method, and or a process, you can be growing and doing that. And there's days that you have better days than others, but sometimes with the goals, I struggle with motivation or to kind of get my vision. I'm still reading that, Frogs to Princes by Bandler. And, that you talked about. It's a really good book, but that's NLP. And as you control NLP, I think it can affect your motivation and stuff. But I think the senior community is a great community. I hadn't even really thought of that, but, even talking about, putting together small groups, but I think that's one that's probably underserviced. I mean,
when I thought of approaching the seniors, I thought, and that's why I'm calling it, the science of happiness, the new science of happiness. That's my theme, right? Because now there's a science of how to be happier. And most people have never heard of it and don't know anything about it. So my idea is to get some people interested in having like a little club where they can work on this past successes list and the past successes worksheet. Basically, those two worksheets, those are the ones that I'm focusing on, because as I said to them when I did my little presentation a couple of weeks ago, as a senior, you have a big advantage now because you have a bigger past than most people. So in other words, you have more opportunities. You have more opportunities to find positive energy in the past, because you have a longer past, which is true, right? But the idea of reframing, I didn't talk about reframing so much, but I will if I have an opportunity. So what I'm trying to interest these companies in is me going in and doing like a series of these things, maybe 6 weeks in a row, and trying to get a few people to start working with those worksheets on a regular basis and building up the past successes list. And then the feelings, right? Because this idea, of the fact that thinking is a connection, which was my big discovery, for me. I'm just going to share my screen here if I can. So I was going to just mention, number 10, right? That a goal is a possible future reality I can connect with now. And number 16, my future self exists now and can be accessed and communicated with, right? Now, when I first had this dream that changed my life, clearly, right, when I was 10, and took me 20 years to figure it out, my original thought was that what happened to me, whatever it was, must be the most normal thing in the world, because I'm just a normal kid. I'm 10 years old, So that's been my approach ever since then, that whatever happened to me must happen to everybody, and they just don't notice it, right? Well, 40 years later or 50 years later, after figuring out that the mind is a connection, your imagination is a connection, and you're connecting to the past, the same as you and I are connecting now. We're in 4 different locations, but because of the technology, we're all connected, right? So the information is going back and forth between the 4 of us. And so that's what thinking is, as far as I'm concerned now, according to this model that I call quantum consciousness, right? So so I believe that each of us connects to the past and to the future all the time, constantly, 50,000 times a day, literally. That's what the psychologists tell us, right? That every thought is a connection to the past and the future. Now, that doesn't make a lot of sense until you realize that the past and the future are an open field of possibilities, right? That there's not just events in the past that happened, but there's events in the past that didn't happen, right? For example, I remember I was in a car accident. A friend of mine was driving the car, and we went off the road. The car flipped over and rolled down into a ditch, and I came out unscathed. I don't think I had a scratch on me. But my friend really badly hurt his leg, right? So that's what happened. Now, when I think about that, I can think about that situation, or I can think about a parallel situation that might have happened. Like, for example, I might have been killed, or I might have broken my back, or maybe my friend could have been unscathed the same as I was. None of those happened, right? Those were all possibilities that might have happened, but didn't happen. What happened was we rolled over, went into a ditch, he was hurt and I wasn't. So the past then consists of not just events that happened, which were physical, but events that might have happened, which I call virtual events, right? Borrowing that concept from quantum physics. And the same thing's true for the future, right? When I think about doing something tomorrow, I think about the future. Well, I can imagine that it might be raining tomorrow or it might be sunny. Both of those are possible, right? And I can think of them both. So the idea then that every thought you have is a connection to some past or some future event, to me is self-evident now, to me. And I'm assuming it's self-evident to you guys, at least more evident now that you've been reading my book and hanging out with me for a while. So this idea that we get information from the future, to me now it's obvious, right? We get information from the possible future. Like if it's raining tomorrow, I'm going to bring an umbrella, and then I'll be ready if it rains. You follow me?
Yep.
Did you have a comment there, Michael?
Yeah, I was just wanted some clarification on, and when you think about events that didn't happen, and then I'm thinking, well, what's the purpose of that? And then so you went into, so it's just really getting information about that event that didn't happen. What's the purpose of this?
Well,
I can understand going to an event that did happen and getting something from it, but what about events that?
Well, most people most people understand their life through a Newtonian concept of reality, right? Now, Newton, he described the physical world as a series of events, kind of like a billiard game, like if, one ball hits another ball and it goes off at a certain angle, right? So that's the way people, a couple hundred years ago, when they started inventing, I guess, what you would call psychology, that's the model that they used. And most people, in my opinion, close to 100%, 98% maybe, most people think that their past has created their present. That the reason the present is the way it is because of the events that happened in their past. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, this car accident, you could say, "Ooh, that was a bad event. That was a negative thing. My friend really badly hurt his leg." Right? Or I can say, "No, it's a good event for me because I didn't get hurt. I was unscathed." Right? So it's positive for me, negative for him. Right? So, but the idea then that every thought that we have is a connection to some non-physical reality. In other words, using my inner senses, right? So the purpose of it is, for example, using our past successes list, once you realize that those events are still there in the past. So when I think of my past successes, i.e., the getting my degree, for example, in university, all I have to do is think about that and I feel great. Because to me, that's a positive event. I have a picture of it. I remember being there. I have a concept of the audience, maybe clapping, right? And I remember getting my degree. And so for me, that was a physical event that took place. I remember that, right? Well, I can imagine, for example, that I bailed out of school and didn't get a degree. If I think about that, then chances are I'm going to feel bad. Why did I quit? Because I can think of lots of times in the past that I did quit on different things, right? So the value of it is that I can bring positive energy into my present. To me, that's the number one value. If I think of a past success, getting a degree, winning a yo-yo contest when I was a kid, then all the energy that I decide is a part of that event, that floods into my present through the pipeline of my imagination. So the first thing it does, you asked me what's the point of it? Well, the first thing is, understanding that the past is still there. It's still available, right? It's not physical anymore, of course, but I can remember it, right? So remembering is connecting to the past. So when I connect to the positive past event, what that does is it makes me feel good, which is everybody's number one goal. Everybody wants to feel good. That's, the Buddha said this 2,500 years ago. We all want to feel good. We don't want to feel bad, right? So what Shakespeare said a few hundred years ago is nothing is good or bad, except that our thinking makes it that way. So, for example, that car accident, I can think of it as a bad thing because my friend ended up in the hospital. Or I can think of it as a positive thing because I was okay. So is it a good event or is it a bad event? It's my choice, right? So that's probably, one of the key insights is that any situation that you think of, whether it happened or whether it didn't happen, it can be positive or it can be negative according to what you decide to give it a meaning as, right? So number one, the first benefit of it, to answer your question there, Michael, is that it allows me to control how I feel. Because I believe that the same as most people think that their present is an effect of their past, I believe it's the other way around. That what my past is my choice, right? And so as Benjamin Hardy says, we make the past from the present. We decide what's positive, what's negative, what's good or what's bad. Am I a loser or am I a winner? I can choose. And if I choose to feel like a loser, I can remember all kinds of times in the past that reinforce that idea that I'm a loser, right? Or I can say I'm a winner, and I can find situations in the past that reinforce the idea that I'm a winner, right? Now, if I'm a winner, if I feel like a winner, if I feel positive, if I feel successful and happy and like a winner, then I'm more likely to try to do something in the future. I might set a goal with a more positive attitude because I have a winner's attitude, right? Right, Michael? So that's the value. So when I think of the future, of course, the future is nothing but virtual events because the future isn't physical yet, right? The past, certain little events in there were physical because I have this physical path that I've passed through in my life. In my book, I talk about taking a trip on a train. Bruno takes a train trip, right? And the train goes through certain stations and it doesn't go through other stations. So the stations that it goes through, those are real events. He can remember those, and those are the real past, right? But the stations that it doesn't go through, it might have gone through, except that the engineer decided to change tracks. They're just virtual events that might have happened but didn't happen, right? So our past has a combination of, a virtually unlimited amount of virtual events which didn't happen. And a few events that did happen, which we can remember, But they don't have a lot of power to them unless we give that power to them. If I say I'm a failure because my parents didn't love me enough, well, if that's true for me, then I'm going to feel like a failure and my parents are going to be bad people. But if I say, hey, my parents were great, I'm going to choose to remember them as great people. And I'm grateful for the upbringing that I got. So I'm feeling grateful now about my past and about my parents, right? So I have the power, and that's the mind, time, and power. The power is you can change a thought. You think of a big snarling dog, you're going to feel afraid. You think of a cute little puppy, hey, you feel, oh, what a cute little puppy. It's the same dog. You're just looking at it at a different age, right? You look at it 6-week-old, it's one thing. You look at it 3 years old, it's another thing. Yeah? But when you realize that, when you have this model, that's in my book, of course, and we've talked about it before, you realize that a goal is a positive event that you're trying to achieve in the future. You're trying to do something positive, right? I use the example of my trip to England, last year. That was something I came up with. I decided to go. I decided to try and arrange a speaking gig there. I did that. That was successful. So that was literally a physical event that I experienced in England last year. I have pictures of it. I have a recording of it. I recorded my talk there. I can prove that it was real. And yet I created it out of thin air. We would love to have you join us in this online community for $1 a day.
You get your own PDF copy of the book upon which this entire training series is based, along with 2 powerful meditation visualization recordings. You also get a free copy of this Design Your Life workbook and a 4-hour video course that tells you how to use it to change your life step by step. You get lifetime access to all of this on day 1, and you can cancel your registration at any time. Just go to mindtimeandpower.com and click the link to join the online community.